thank you. Thank you very much. So this story is about losing everything and fighting to get back what you've lost. Everyone fears this. I've actually been through it. So the circumstances are unimportant because I was so far from knowing them myself. What I knew is that I existed and I wasn't comfortable. But I didn't know who I was or where I was. I didn't know the voices that called me their son. Records show that I was in a coma for a month. Unlike the movie fantasies, there is no brilliant wake-up moment with me going, "Oh, where am I?" For a time, I couldn't walk, speak, or move. When you forget everything about your life, you get to hear the best of who you were. People told me that I enjoyed going to Glastonbury with friends I can remember, and that I lived on a canal boat to save money as a student, and that I have a brother and sister who joined me for this meal just before the accident. A few months before the accident was 2010, the volcanic eruption in Iceland. Now this disrupted thousands of flights, including mine, and it stopped me from flying back to England to do the half marathon. It's possible to be kind of intimidated by the person you were and who you used to be. But I decided that I wanted to be that person again rather than this hospital patient. I would fight to become the man they called Ben again and complete the half marathon. So, how bad was it? Well, I mean, there were no broken bones, but the impact caused me to have something more serious with a traumatic brain injury. That's an eruption of damage that disconnects so many different parts of the brain. In this case, regaining consciousness is not a given. And even if I did, the expectation was that I'd be significantly impaired for the rest of my life. A few years after the accident, a researcher began showing my brain scans to audiences of doctors. And he asked them to predict what my recovery would be like. They all shook their head and they'd say, you wouldn't walk, talk, or learn again. They didn't think I'd become an author, have a second master's degree, and be ready to work again. But life was different. Yeah, sorry, so the book. Yeah, so life was different. Life is no longer like strolling down a brightly lit road with great music, friends having a good time, and good Wi-Fi where you feel open and happy to new experiences. It became a dark street, one destroyed and deserted except for figures who shift along the edges. People look at you funny and you think, who am I? This book is written by me, but also as a collaboration with 25 other voices who give different aspects of my recovery. And I'm going to read you an extract from the book that's written by my mum. So it says, there were times in his life became stressful, even within the routines and confines of his ward. He would panic and sometimes lash out if people he didn't know approached him without care and preparation. Ben became seen as aggressive, but no one ever connected. It might be how he was handled. They just saw it as part of him. And there was no effort to treat him with more understanding. The patients on the ward were mainly elderly. People were mainly recovering from strokes, and there wasn't much experience in head injuries. One member of the care staff threatened to file a complaint against Ben for assault after Ben lashed out at him. We were mortified that anyone could make this kind of complaint on a brain injury ward. We later discovered from the staff member who knew Ben well, that Ben had been woken up first thing in the morning by an unfamiliar person in an unfamiliar way. It was more likely that he was frightened rather than aggressive. It was distressing all round, particularly when the medics saw it as a symptom of the impact of his brain injury. It was seen as more evidence for the brain damage and confirmation that we shouldn't get overexcited about Ben's possible trajectory. Traffic accidents are sudden, like earthquakes. They take what they take, whether that's professionally, personally, whatever, and we have to deal with what's left. When I've been interviewed about my story, people say, my God, you have to deal with all of this and the fact the accident took your girlfriend's life? No, I can remember her. There are no memories to recall. The doctors said I might never remember her. So, after fighting to be myself again for 2 years and completing the half marathon, I could remember her tattoos and her Canadian accent. Now, this wasn't a moment of sadness. It was one of the happiest points of my recovery. It showed I was getting better. My brain was working. And I'm so happy to have her in my head again. So just going back to what it took at this point, I want to share with you something written by me about training for the marathon. I used to train for marathons before the accident. In fact, I was supposed to run a marathon in April 2010, a few months before the accident. In the end, I couldn't do it. I was in Berlin, and I couldn't fly back because of the ash cloud that caused by the volcano in Iceland. Planes across Europe were grounded, and so was I. This time, I didn't want to miss the chance. I'd already started going for runs in the park with my dad to begin with, to get myself fit, and continuing to increase these runs. I discovered I was still breathing extremely heavily. And it was so bad that I make dogs very angry and they bark at me furiously. I'd also agitate, well, I wouldn't agitate. A group of kids walking past, walking home from school would make fun of me and take the piss out of my breathing, annoy me intensely. However, it did seem that I was breathing very noisily and I was incredibly out of breath. At the time of the accident, I worked in international development, as did my girlfriend. And she was in the Haiti region for the aid recovery after the earthquake in 2010. So I had gone to visit her and we went on holiday to the Dominican Republic. Walking back to our room after a meal, the speeding car lost control and left the road. Basically, when the car hit, this is my brain. It's very big, I know. But yeah, it got completely scrunched up and can't go back to how it was. So because of the accident, my short-term memory has been a problem, although it has massively improved. And there are certain mechanisms I can use, like this, that can help counteract such problems. I still have a tremor in my right arm, but it is controlled. But it really does affect a lot of what I do. My handwriting is severely affected, and it makes certain tasks quite difficult. My voice is different as well, so now I sound like this. However, the old Ben wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So I'd like it to reach out to every person who's ever been hit by a disaster and wants to recover. In your fight to be yourself, paperwork, tick boxes, and risk assessments will get in your way. Checks and balances are important, yeah, but when checks and balances, they need to be flexible enough to allow transformation to happen. People who were risk averse said to me, don't go back to Glastonbury, don't do a half marathon, don't do a second master's degree. I did them all, because all of those goals were important to me. What I've learned is that when you're very clear on your goals, you can always find others who are willing to help, and many have. This is the final extract of my book that I want to read. It was written by Diana Conyers, who was the head of the course I did at university, and she accepted me onto the course. So we discussed the various options and eventually decided that even though he didn't need another master's, it might be best if Ben enrolled to do the full course. We were well aware that we were taking a risk. We didn't know how Ben could cope with the work or what the implications might be for the overall management of the course. However, we agreed to give it a try and review the situation after the first term. There was a particular reason why I had no hesitation in accepting Ben onto the degree. In April 2010, my husband had a stroke and spent a long time, the 4 months, in the same ward as Ben. We worked out Ben must have arrived in the ward a few weeks after my husband left. I still had vivid memories of his stay there. My husband's situation was very different to Ben's. Like most of the patients on the ward, he was an old man, 88 years at the time. And it soon became evident he would never make a full recovery. He was then moved to a nursing home where he eventually died. However, there were also two young men, same age as Ben, in the ward at the time. One had had a stroke and the other was suffering brain damage following an accident. I was very moved by their situation. At the age of 88, serious health problems aren't unexpected, and it's totally different when someone is in their 20s. So one of the first doctors who treated me in the Dominican Republic didn't let paperwork get in the way of his care. He shared with my family the one principle he worked by, and that was to always follow the patient. The idea is that we can never predict how far a person, organisation, or community will go in their recovery after disaster. Why would we not let them make their own goals and support them to take action for themselves in their own recovery? On a side note, international development organisations are starting to apply the same idea in their work to support regions after disaster. Local voice and action must be championed in international development, just as patient voice and action must be championed in hospitals. In my fight to become Ben again, I've become a new Ben with different strengths, struggles, and a different story. The final step of my recovery is to work again, to contribute, so that my lived experience can help others. My circumstance is, of course, particular to me, but I'm not alone in my aspirations to achieve the final hurdle towards employment. I have become adept in filling in job applications. My CV is impressive, particularly with my employment and consultancy record before the accident. However, I recognise that prospective employers, I recognise that they can relate to this. However, in getting 25 friends, family, and professionals to keep to their word and contribute to my book, find an editor. In fact, I work with two, and and work with a publisher to get my book published, and meeting every deadline is probably more of an achievement without taking into account, the difficulties I've had to face. What's come from the book's publication, the good reviews, got attention from a whole range of different audiences. I've spoken at local festivals, bookshops, and independent ones, at conferences, various events, such as here. First with the involvement of my dad, and now I'm doing this by myself. And the biggest spin-off has been talking at Brighton TEDx 2018, where I was voted the best speaker out of the 17 that took place. Not only that, my talk has been uploaded onto the main TED site, which is quite impressive in itself. So, that is something that the old Ben wouldn't have done and wouldn't have attempted to achieve. But none of this is anything in terms of giving my relevant skills to employers and my work situation. Double-tick organisations have interviewed me, but against the range of candidates, I can't, impress them enough. When asked about what reasonable adjustments I needed in one interview that I thought was going quite well, I explained I needed tasks to be clear and more opportunities to check in with the manager. I was clearly told by the employer at the time that this wasn't going to happen, and consequently I didn't get the job. But I volunteered for local organisations and the university department. I have been time rich whilst looking for work. Opportunities such as this, I hope will leave you with some thoughts about the things you wouldn't normally think of, because you don't have to. As part of this new and emerging role, people asked me a number of questions following my talk. So I'll give you a head start. I put together a few questions that I'd like to share with you, and I can give you the answers that I gave. So if you'd like to pick a question out, and I'll read it out. Thank you. So I have been asked, what have you gained from this experience? And my answer has been, thanks to the amazing support of friends and family, I've become quite resilient. And I've learned that I'm the only one that can change, the situation. Disaster doesn't have to be all bad. Good things can happen as well. The new Ben is doing a whole load of things that my previous self would never have contemplated doing. Do you want to pick another one out? Thank you. Another question I get asked is, what is your overall feeling about what happened to you? Well, the answer would be, to start with, I was a fucking angry bastard. But certainly with time, I've become a lot more normal about it and mellowed quite a lot. It's now taken 9 years since the accident, and changes in me are still ongoing. And rather than go on about it, why don't you just buy my book and you can read about it? Do you want to pick one out for me? Thank you. So another question. So the accident happened to you in the Dominican Republic. How did I get back to the UK? Private air ambulance with full specialist and medical support team that was covered by travel insurance. So never leave without having insurance to cover you. The funny thing is, I got nagged about getting travel insurance for the 10 days I was away by my family. And I was so concerned that I couldn't get any travel insurance that would cover kidnap cover. But this has to be the best £10 I have ever spent. Okay, there's two more. Can you pick one up? Thank you. So another question. So what motivates you to keep going with your recovery? The answer is not wanting to be a victim of this event. You can choose to change the story. Feeling that I can't take back control has given me choices. I've gone for the many opportunities along the way. There is always a choice. And the last one. What is the main thing I've lost from the accident? I guess the main thing is the expectation that my life was sorted. Nothing can protect you from the uncertainties of life. Despite having to start from zero, I have, through sheer determination and support, achieved many goals. So, everything has a risk. We all risk being in the wrong place at the wrong time. If the worst happens to you and you survive, take risk assessments. And fight. So that you can rebuild and discover a new you. Thank you.